Through the Noise with your host, Ernesto Glucksmann.
Scott, thanks for swinging by. This is Scott Attman, Vice President of Business Development for Acme Paper and Supply Co. This is a lot more than just paper. There's a lot of things you guys do. I can't thank you enough for jumping on the show with me. I've been interested in stories as companies like yours sort of transition into the area of more thinking about what sustainability really means. You guys have a really interesting story. Let's start with the beginning. Like, I just, went on your website a couple of days ago, or whatever, and it said 1943. That's a long time ago. I guess you weren't necessarily around then when that happened. So who started the business?
So it was 1946 we got started. My grandfather started the business. His parents actually had a deli in downtown Baltimore called Attman's Delicatessen. It's the oldest delicatessen in the country, actively operating by that family still today. So my grandfather was the oldest of three sons, just got back from the war and just got married. And his mother said to him, the deli business, it's a tough business, 7 days a week. They made a living, but they worked really hard for it. And she said, why don't you try something else? Because this will be here if you need it. So she said, there's a man who sells us butcher paper, brown bags, napkins. Plastics had not been invented yet at that time. She said, he wears a nice suit. The product doesn't spoil. Why don't you try that? So out of the trunk of his car, he started selling paper bags, napkins, and disposable, what we would now consider sustainable items, throughout downtown Baltimore, and expanded over that time. The company started. I love it. Our birthday is April 1st. So that's our April Fool's Day celebration every year.
And that's kind of the perishable goods. It's not a perishable good. I bet that was quite attractive to your grandfather and thinking of a different approach to doing some business, right?
It's really interesting because, things that we see today that we take for granted just didn't exist in 1946. So I asked him once, what's the greatest invention you saw in your lifetime? He passed away a couple years ago. He was 95. He worked till the day he went into the hospital at 95 years old, sharp and very involved in the business throughout the entire time. And I asked him, I said, what's the most incredible invention? I thought he was going to say plasma TV. You could hang a TV on a wall, right? Super thin. And he said, the microwave changed everything. He said, the microwave blew my mind. So if you think about that and even how it impacts our business, from the microwave came, plastics and other materials that then people could use to move food and other materials throughout, what we now just take for granted. And we always kid, as we got into more sustainable options, he would say, I started the business sustainably. He goes, you dummies messed it all up with all the plastic and all the other stuff in the middle. He goes, now, pendulum shift, we're all back to paper. Granted, when they started, those were just the materials that were around.
Scott, can you give us a sense of your role at the organization today and what's sort of driving the exploration of more sustainable products?
Sure. My role is business development, and I work with clients throughout typically the Washington, D.C. metro region. However, we do business throughout the country, from coast to coast. We do a little bit of international business as well. We were fortunate to step into sustainability out of curiosity and opportunity very early in the process. And we look at sustainability through two sides. We look at through facility and cleaning supplies, which is one side of our business, which is hygiene and facility solutions. And then we look at sustainability through another outlet of our business or vertical, which is food service. So all the packagings and things that we see when we go out to the dinner or grocery stores and so forth. So, I work with clients and help them find products to help them differentiate themselves. And I had a client once say to me, that was a restaurant operator in DC. He said, I've got a client to the left of me and right of me, sometimes above and below me. I need to find a way to differentiate myself without adding square footage to my business and grow. So for me, it's carry out packaging. So I want to do it thoughtfully and properly and still give people a great opportunity and a great experience eating at home as they would in our restaurant. But I want to be identifiably different, but I also want to be sustainably responsible. So, that stuck with me. And that was a conversation probably back in 2009.
Mm.
And I think that continues to push us to look for new alternatives. I think our organization, again, in our business, it's my father, two uncles, a cousin, and two brothers. And then I always say 250 people that really keep us in line and know what they're doing. But it pushes us to look for new things. And I think the manufacturing community recognizes our business as one that's willing to take a risk, look for new ideas. So we're fortunate that a lot of people knock on our doors and say, hey, I'm thinking of this new thing. What do you think? And sometimes we shoot it down and tell them, tweak this, tweak that, and other things, it's spot on and we go for it.
It does have like a sense, like when you do purchase something and the materials that come in seem novel or different than the usual plastic, container, or worse, styrofoam container that's just thrown in. And those things do the job too. And they have the properties that you want to keep your food, warm while you're bringing it home. But I guess that's a value position there. If you want your business to stand out, like you actually pay attention and you care about where all this extra packaging waste goes, that's an easy way, I think, to show value, right? But
it's definitely a differentiator. And if you roll back the clock, 2008, 2009 through 2012, people did it. We say they're shades of green, and people were choosing those materials for a host of reasons. One, they were committed to the environment, and they were doing it because they knew in their core and in their culture that was critical. Other people did it for the reason that it was a differentiator. They knew that the customer base wanted those items. They may not have been as personally passionate about it, but they were passionate about running a good business, and they found that as a way to differentiate themselves. Now, as the products become more available and we start to see it in more outlets, we are seeing a considerable amount of R&D going into the development of the products so they can either mimic the performance of these more traditional materials or try and minimize the gap in pricing and some of the other things that may be concerns so people can use them more readily without feeling the impact of changes.
And I guess that's where the details come in, because not all packages, not all utensils with different materials work quite the same way, right? You have some interesting stories there of some learning over time, whether different sourced material performs better or not, and also the pricing associated. Like you can't presume that it's more expensive or less expensive. It just depends, right?
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack in there. So
right.
We were fortunate to get an early start. The House of Representatives came to us very early on, and this goes back to maybe 2002, and they wanted us to explore compostable options. When they reached out to me and I came in for that meeting, I'd never even heard the word. So I said, well, what is it? And they showed me a fork, and they showed me a trash bag, and they said, this is made out of corn. And this is what it is. Here's a manufacturer. They had contacted the House of Representatives, and they said, can you explore it for us? We'd like to switch it out for a day. And at the time, for perspective, they were buying a really inexpensive plastic cutlery for $7. And when we spoke to the manufacturer, and that's $7 for 1,000 pieces.
Okay.
All right. So, less than a penny a unit. When I called the manufacturer, who was based in Philadelphia at the time, I called them. I said, this is who I am. We're a distribution. We're looking into this. How much are these? It was $120 a case. So the delta in 2002, I came back and they said, whoa. Yeah, we can't absorb that. Fast forward to 2004, we did it again. The price had dropped down to $60. And they said, okay, for a day, we want to do this on Earth Day. And we made a couple tweaks. And that was the first time that we explored this. And this really was the front lines of sustainability. Nobody had really touched anything. We had a manufacturer come to us once, and we were just about to put a deal together where we had a client that said, this is going to be great. We're going to put it into all of our cafeterias throughout the region. And they worked in government cafeterias everywhere. And it was a plate made of corn. When you opened the bag, it smelled like nacho chips. Okay. Your mouth would water when you would open up for the plate.
Delicious.
And the last thing the guy said to us was, now the only thing is once you open the case, you have to use them all that day. You can't save any for the next day because they'll go stale. And we said, well, that's not going to work.
Okay.
Right. So we learned through that iteration.
Okay.
Then we fast forward and we found PLA, which is the material that we're most commonly familiar with now. So it looks like the plastic cup.
PLA
so
stands for, sorry, just to
PLA stands for polylactic acid.
Okay.
My wife always says I'm a wealth of useless knowledge. That's one of my talking points there. So polylactic acid. So it's really plastic made from starch-based plants. Okay. Typically, in the beginning, it was corn and potato. Now it's tapioca and other materials too that can produce that material. So we did a Earth Week at the House of Representatives. We found a manufacturer that can make a container, a hinge container, and they were going to use that for lunch. And we called the manufacturer and I said, I just need maybe 20 cases. They needed a truckload, which was thousands of cases. And after a lot of begging and pleading, they agreed that they would help us out. And I said, you know, if this works, we'll support you.
This is for Congress.
Yeah. And now it's one of our major manufacturers. Now we're bringing it in by the truckloads, again, fast forwarding and the environment changing. So first day of lunch, Monday, lunch starts at 11:30, and maybe at 11:30 and 1 second, my phone rings, and it's the House of Representatives calling me, the chef, and saying, Scott, we got a problem. Every time I put food in the container, it falls through and hits the floor. And I said, maybe it's one bad case. Try another one. What are you putting in? They said lasagna. I said, try. They said, we've tried them all. I said, let me call the manufacturer. We called. They called R&D. They called me right back, and they said, nothing over 110 degrees. So we were the front lines. We're learning in the experience.
Could have used that detail a little more.
Now there's disclaimers. Now the environment, the distribution community knows, the food service community knows that is cold only. But that material can be used in hinge containers. We use it in cutlery now. We use it sometimes in bags and trash bags, and we use it in cups. So you go to Starbucks, that's a plastic cup. It is not compostable. It is a plastic cup that simply goes to recycling. But you'll sometimes see PLA cups that will look identical to it. If you flip it upside down, the recycling number on it is 7. And it'll say PLA underneath of it. That is a compostable cup. What's really interesting about that recycling number 7 is it means other. So there was a period of time, we don't get the calls so much anymore, where people would say, hey, we'd like to use PLA, but we can't use it because that has BPA and all of these other things that are in it, because the recycling community never had anything from compostables. They still don't. It's just in the other category, which is everything that had not been developed pre 2000. So there's some education there as well.
It's just the categorization of it just didn't fit anywhere. So they just put you in other, and people assumed that it had other things.
Well, they assume other could be plastics that may not be recyclable. They could be items that have BPA in it, like, people were concerned about baby bottles. So that's where other may fall. And compostable items don't have their own recycling number. They just get grouped in separately.
So, I mean, these are like lessons that are just learned, I guess, through time. And some of them can be pretty tough lessons to learn in the moment, when you're just trying to fulfill the customer's needs. But how would you characterize now? Like, how would you characterize the level of education across the board, from the customer to to your direct client, to the guys that are making this stuff? Like, where do you think, how would you grade it if you had to?
That's a great question. So I look at the country, I break the country up in different categories. You have your coastlines, West Coast, East Coast, and it's really northeast. So Virginia-ish north. Florida has some awareness to it. Obviously the West Coast, along the whole West Coast, Colorado, the mountain areas. Minnesota is a hotbed as well for really understanding sustainability and gravitating to it. So in our market and in those markets, we continue to see demand increasing year over year over year. As you discussed, we sell styrofoam and other items to clients. However, in the history of our business, this will be the first year where we are not bringing those products in anywhere near the volumes where we have historically. We have really started to see that shift, and a lot of it has been because of government regulation and different, sometimes just jurisdictions. Now the state of Maryland, where we're seeing foam bans and things that just went in place coincidentally this week in Maryland. An interesting anecdotal story. I spoke on a panel, maybe 2012, and on there was someone from waste management. And I think the things that go into it is not necessarily just the product selection, but the thing that I wish we could see is actually more availability to compost in commercial compost settings. So out west, that's available. There's groups in Washington State that they run great. I mean, they are the model for composting facilities. So we lack that in this region. So we've seen some clients come to us and say, we want to compost, but we know when the product gets home, it's just going to landfill, or when our people aren't putting it where it needs to go. So we want to use recyclable plastics because it goes to recycling at least there versus compost where people are sending it to landfill. And there's a little bit of an argument, discussion, and we're trying to find our way right now with that in this market. But I was saying in 2012, I sat on a panel, someone from Waste Management was on it. And at that time, composting was picking up and there was some more availability. And I asked, when do you think we'll be able to compost at home? And she said, we're so far away from that. The infrastructure just isn't there. And I asked the follow-up question. I said, are we just jaded because in our marketplace, there's an awareness to it, but what about the rest of the country? Now, if my business is growing year over year in regards to compostable products and sustainable alternatives for the country, maybe only, and I say this with optimism, 5% of all purchases in disposable packaging is compostable, while we're, well over 30% in our market and growing year over year. So she said, I went to visit, and I think she said her family is in Nebraska, her parents, older parents. And she walked in and said, where do I put my bottle for recycling? And her parents said, oh, no, we don't recycle here. There's like a program where you can pay $5 and you just get to throw it in the trash. Now, it wasn't a program. It was a $5 penalty.
Wow.
But the mentality there was, hey, if I pay $5, it's a benefit program. So there still is this education and growth that needs to take place around the country to push us forward, because the thing that really I would love to see is, the masses start to move to it in little pieces around other parts of the country, because that's what's going to drive down costs. It's going to create efficiencies. And that's where we're going to see real growth, because those borders that we discussed before just aren't enough to drive where we ultimately need to get to.
It's a complicated area. I often wonder about even just the recycling component. Ever since China stopped accepting our stuff, there's just just put on the news and you find more and more that the recycling is really just going into landfills at this point, because they just don't know what to do with it. We don't have the sorting technologies or even manpower to pull out the plastics and basically sort them into the right spots. Most people are just grabbing whatever looks kind of plasticky and just throws it in the recycling and then just hope that it actually gets managed or dealt with in an appropriate manner. But the fact is that most of it isn't. It's just landing back in the landfill. And this is probably above both our pay grades, but I'm curious to know, is there more potential then for compostable? Because when I visited Minnesota, I went to the airport's awesome, by the way. It's so clean and like big. And anyway, and they have clearly, like, the bins are very clearly marked. There's the trash can, there's the plastics, and then that's the compost. So they have something they're doing with the compost. In a sense. And I wonder if there's more potential opportunity if we just kind of more focused on the composting and creating infrastructure to divert some of that stuff into areas that can be repurposed. Or maybe again, I don't know. I'm not an expert in this world. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts of what I believe to be the situation. One is we do know that recycling, waste management, all of that is a business. So it needs to be done in a profitable manner. Real estate is an issue because for compost, you've got to sit on some considerable real estate. Where it's located, because there can be odors and fumes that are released. In Maryland, where we're located, we've seen several facilities open. And at one point when we first started with sustainability, so, one thing we didn't talk about is after that test period, fast forward to 2007, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats had control of the House of Representatives at that time, and they started a greening of the Capitol program. And the idea of that program was really to be a model of sustainability for the country within the walls. So they changed out all the incandescent bulbs to LED bulbs. They tried to have alternative transportation for people. And then we were working with them for it was the first 100% compostable food service operation in the country. And at that point, we were about 98% compliant to being compostable with the guidelines of nothing made, all products made domestically. And if there wasn't a domestic option, then we could go overseas to find something. And it was a really good education process for us. But at that time, there was availability to compost, and we were really doing some great things diverting trash from those other areas. But some of the properties were mismanaged with water runoff, and they just got shut down one after another. And we've seen it over the last decade. One opens, one gets shut down. And I don't know enough of why we can't keep one open and what the challenges are, but I know there's a demand. I know that we're creating a mass of the materials. And that is a wish of mine, is that we could just get a facility that's operating to support this region and support other regions around the country.
Yeah, I guess the commercial viability of those composting locations and the ability to mitigate it's bacteria eating it all up, and it comes with gases and strange fumes and whatever. And so just managing that is probably, there's just not enough at a significant scale, I would imagine, to have worked out all those bugs, right? And I don't know, it just sounds a lot like early days of the tech world, where there's new technology, we can do stuff with it, but we haven't quite figured out how to really do it right. There was just a ton of software that just wasn't very workable, and it would fail. And just over time, trial and error, and, trying a new concept a different way, things have improved to the point where we are today. We can now have this recording, on YouTube, on Zoom, and it works pretty good, given that everybody's using it right now. And so I wonder if that's something in terms of the infrastructure of composting is probably the same thing that, we haven't been, do we have any big scale composting operations for some plant-based product out there? Are there?
It's the big one is out in Washington State. They've got a huge facility, and that one operates, that's a sharp operation, and they run efficiently. I would say, it's interesting in regards to sustainability. Again, we have the two verticals in our business, the facility side and the food service side. So on the packaging side, as you related to technology, I don't think we are necessarily still in dial-up, but I think we are probably just hard-lined in, just getting to what we thought was high speed. Like you could download 3 songs on Napster in an hour, but we're quite.
You better pick the right 3 songs.
Yeah, right. So we are sort of in that phase, as crazy as that sounds, because we seem so developed with technology. On the facility side, in contrast, we can push the clock back to 1993. So Bill Clinton gave an executive order in 1993 that he wanted all federal buildings to go green. And that was the first time anyone had ever used the terminology go green. And the definition of go green at that time was to do something better for the environment than what you're doing today. So if you were cleaning with bleach and pouring that down the drains, find something less caustic. That would satisfy green. If you were, throwing towels away and using all sorts of this, divert it to a different material, or use a controlled towel system. So instead of people going in the bathroom and taking 35 of those folded towels and throwing them in, use a folded towel system where you wave and you get one at a time. Better for the environment. So that's 1993. We're almost 20 years into that, where food service, we're really at like 10 years into some of these materials. So I think we'll get there. It's all business, right? So someone needs to figure out who can make money at doing it, and then replicate that from region to region.
And then replicate that, and then get enough buyers to continue to keep buying, so that the cash flow keeps coming, so that you can then scale up the operations and you can improve the operations. Like, it's half the time I think of business is just, can I make enough money around the problem I want to solve long enough to actually really get good at solving that problem? And that's a tricky spot really to find. So I definitely commend you guys, because it just, you gotta keep the lights on, you gotta get paid, you got employees, you got distribution, you got a lot of things going on, but you can't just rip the Band-Aid and just say, okay, we're just gonna do all wholesale this type of product and that's it. You gotta shift into it, and you gotta take the lessons as they come, is what it seems have done well. Can you tell, you got some interesting technology on the other side, though, I guess the more the facilities. Can you talk a little bit about some of that stuff that's coming up?
Sure. Yeah, so we look at sustainability from not only the product, but also processes. So going back to that Bill Clinton, his executive order, that sort of is what we use as our impetus for sustainability. What can we introduce to the marketplace to just make it safer for the people that live in those communities, work in those communities, and make it more, environmentally friendly. So we're using less waste or finding ways to do that. So a couple products that have just come out that we were really excited about. One is about maybe 2 or 3 years old, but with COVID where we are now, it's just gained a lot of traction because it is the best process. So it's called Protexis, which is electrostatic spraying. If you're watching the news over the last several months, you'll see it sort of looks, I always call it like the Star Wars, like Jedi gun, but we don't use gun, we call it sprayer, because it's in schools and airlines. But if you see, Marriott had a little bit about it where they were spraying them now in hotels, and Delta Airlines and United Airlines, they're showing on the news them spraying, and it's got a bladder. And what it does is it electrically charges the chemical that's in the sprayer, so it covers an entire area. What's really interesting about this one is the product that goes into it can be consumed in its diluted format. So it's completely green in regards to no odor, no eye protection, skin protection, or any of those things needed. It's a safe product, but we also use a lot less product and a lot less water because it's just a mist that electrostatically captures a surface.
So it's drawn to the surface instead of like swirling into the atmosphere.
Positive
it
and
actually,
negative.
you use less of it because you can kind of aim it, and you could just see it stick to the surface you're trying to clean.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a positive and negative
that's pretty
charge.
Cool.
So it's absolutely fantastic. So you can go through a room where people would normally have to wipe down every surface, and just human error, they're going to miss a spot. Now you can spray a room, and this mist is grabbing all the surfaces at a 360 degrees front and back. So if you think of a school and your children go into school, no one's cleaning under the desk, or you get that email that someone has flu in the school.
Oh, it swirls into under the desk. Oh, which is where kids are always okay.
Yeah, or the big blocks, or the Legos, and
it
the
gets into the
wipe everything and try. Now they can spray, and the mist captures all those surfaces. But we've done it in professional sports teams' locker rooms. We've done it in daycare centers, universities, hospitals, nursing homes, restaurants. Really, every facility is now jumping on this because it's so efficient. It's time effective. Their people use less, and it took really a job that people didn't like to do, which was, hey, you got to wipe down all the surfaces, and made it super easy. And now it's a job that people want to do. inside those facilities.
Yeah, I would imagine the manual labor of wiping. You probably start off pretty conscientious about wiping everything, and then as the day goes on, and you get more tired. You're just kind of like, just miss a few things because you spent all day in this locker room wiping every object that's in front of you, right? And
yeah.
so this stuff, okay, that's really impressive. And is that something you guys developed, or is that like with the partners and you just kind of bringing it to market as a licensed technology distributor, I suppose?
Yeah. So we're distribution. We
Okay.
do have a division of our company where called Alpha Products, where we'll go out and create products and we'll go out and patent products, and they're our brainchilds, but we outsource production. But 98% of what we provide to our clients are products that we go out, we source, we find. And again, as I said earlier, a lot of manufacturers like to come to us because we're willing to take the risk to try something new. And this was one of them. It's almost becoming more commonplace because COVID has put so much attention towards disinfection. But we've been running with it for a couple of years. Another product that we have is called PathSpot. And PathSpot is really interesting because it's a it's a scanning device that scans bacteria on your hands. So again, it goes towards sustainability is there's an overuse of gloves in the marketplace. People are using gloves for everything because it's a false sense of security that if they've got gloves on that they're doing something safe. The truth is the gloves are carrying more bacteria than everything because people leave them on way too long and they're not washing their hands. So someone comes in, they scan in, they wash their hands, they put their hands under. In 2 seconds of getting a hand scan, they get a pass or fail. That goes to the cloud, and the manager or owner of the business gets a readout at the end of the day, pass, fail. What's interesting is about 20%, 1 out of every 5 people in the first month when they first install it fail on hand washing. If you get a fail, you have to wash again until you get a pass.
How many? What's the first month?
It's about 20% failure, which is 1 out of every 5.
Which means somebody's like not washing thoroughly enough and they're rushing out to get back on the line, right? And they have bacteria.
Again, using COVID as the example, when this first started happening,
you don't want to be in that bathroom too long. You want to just go do your business.
Yeah, and even at home, you'd sit with your kids. You'd say, hey, wash 20 seconds, say the alphabet. Now, 4 months later, everybody back to habit again. Wash hands, move, and they're out the door in 10 seconds. But that's not proper, especially if you're in an establishment where clean hands are critical. So what's nice about it from a safety side is now you know that people are operating with actual clean hands when they're touching. From a sustainability side, it's driving less glove usage because people are doing jobs with actual clean hands and they don't need to use gloves as a safety net. So we're diverting people out of petroleum-based products.
I see. And there's some overuse of those gloves or not taking the gloves off frequently enough, assuming that just because you put the glove on, it's clean, right? I'm wearing a glove, so it's clean. Well, maybe your hands are, but the glove that you've used all day, not anymore. Yeah. Or here's the thing, you can go stick them under and check and get a check off. Yes, clean, no clean.
You can still sneeze on a glove. You can still touch raw chicken on a glove. You can still touch a dirty surface with a glove. Your hands are clean inside, but those gloves still need to be changed. Rule of thumb for food services, you're supposed to wash hands every 30 minutes. I don't know if that's realistic, but that's sort of the rule of thumb.
They probably added more time to hoping that because most people don't meet the time that just, there's issues around all of that always to try to figure out what should you be asking for. But to actually have a test. So you just put your hands underneath it and how long does it take to actually check?
2 seconds. It's a technology callard visible light spectroscopy.
Right. This has to be in every establishment. It just like, all right, Scott, this is the new future for you. Like this thing works. This should be everywhere. And yeah, what's the name of it again? Just in case anybody.
PathSpot.
PathSpot.
Yeah.
PathSpot.
Yeah, it's really sharp.
Where are you selling this mostly into right now?
So food service. Okay. And that's everything from caterers to cafeterias to just general dining operators, full service dining. And then we've even had interest from healthcare, not so much for doctors, because it's really tracking for what's known as gut biome bacteria. So it's your salmonellas, E. coli, and things like that. But if your hands are clean from that and you get a pass, you're probably clear of other things. But for doctors going into surgery,
It's a different level
for that area. But we are seeing surgical centers putting it in nurse stations and areas just to drive awareness for clean hands, so people are practicing properly and washing properly.
Yeah, because you can't see the bacteria, but now we can with this device. You can kind of get a check mark or something. Wow. The just guys, we're on the topic of technology. I'm just curious to know, just given, I mean, this might be more on the operations side of the house, but what are the software tools your company uses to sort of manage all this stuff? Or if are you doing any data collecting yourselves amongst all the products that you sell and everything that you do?
Yeah, so we were, we thought when COVID happened, we thought we may see a break in some of our just business chaos, but we've managed to stay busy. But it was timed with, we are in the process of doing a complete rehaul of our operation system. So we've had a legacy system that we've worked with for probably close to 2 decades. That we've managed to upkeep year after year after year, but everybody understands to change, to modify, update, there's costs there that at some point, you're holding together an old car. So we just finished a selection process between a few different ERP groups. Wow. And we are now in an implementation process that hopefully we're 30 days out from, that will give us a lot more capability for collecting data and being a little more analytical in our processes. So, we've done as much as we can in our current system with analytics, but we think this is going to help us a whole lot more with understanding our clients, with understanding, product selection, maybe a little more information, though we're pretty good with it in regards to placing orders, inventory turns, seasonality, and things like that. But we're really excited about where we're going to go in regards to technology. And then even we'll bolt on with some other pieces to the ERP software in regards to online ordering as we try to continue to make the customer experience better. A lot of the legacy systems, you can provide online ordering, but it's really a system that was friendly for us as the distributor. It was more backwards facing. We're looking to move ourselves forward with a more customer-facing experience, more typical to what they see online for their regular day.
So you still want them calling in, but at the same time calling in orders, but at the same time you could be the option as you could order it online more consistently. Is that the kind of approach?
Yeah. We 30% of our business is ordered online right now.
Okay.
I think our goal would probably get to 80%.
Okay.
Because then our communication with our clients would be less transactional, maybe in communication. So we would still have what we call our customer satisfaction team, but they would be more proactive in communication, and it would be a lot more interactive and resource driven than give me 2 of these, give me 3 of these. It would be a lot more outreach.
Shepherding into new areas, or just kind of orienting themselves on what they can do with the new system, right? The software system itself.
Yeah, okay. I think, we want our communication to feel different and sound different.
Who did you pick at ERP?
So we are working with NetSuite.
NetSuite?
And, and the implementation process has been really good, and we've been happy with how things are going
I mean, you're replacing the engine of a airplane while it's flying, right? Is one, and the metaphor that may or may not work, but you gotta guess what it can feel like, I think sometimes.
Exponentially, yes. And as we get closer to the date and it starts to feel more and more real. I wouldn't say we're landing without wheels, but I mean, you can feel the pressure of coming in for that landing and making sure that everything's tight. And we have a couple people on our team that have gone through ERP changeovers in other organizations, and it's been great to have them because they're realistic in the process. They said, you're not going to catch it all before it launches. So don't kill yourself in the details. So we're trying to capture as much as we can and make sure that we're ready and going through our processes. But, we know that there's going to be things that come up afterwards.
Yeah. Once you put in a little bit more sophisticated architecture, I think that's my child there over there, not wanting to take a nap. Why don't we wrap it up on that note? Scott, I'd love to keep asking you about the NetSuite implementation, but this was fantastic, man. Thank you for giving us a sense of what it's like to be in your world. And I'm really excited to know as you guys evolve further into it. Let's do this again. Let's have you back on the show. And I'd like to know more about, perhaps we could talk more about the NetSuite implementation, how it's actually transformed perhaps your better visual. Like now that you're able to have a better architecture, a software architecture that you can drag out more of the data you want to measure, the next phase is going to be, well, what of all this data that we collect is truly actionable and respond to, and that we can build a new process around. Maybe we can explore some of that, especially if it impacts on the business development side of the house. I'd be really curious about that. So
yeah, that would be exciting, and I would look forward to that. So I appreciate it.
If anybody out there has, is in the restaurant business or hospitality or schools or whatever, where should they go to look up other potential products if they're not working with you already?
Yeah, so they can find us real easy. Email us at info@acmepaper.com. That's super easy. In regards to just good information that we put out on a regular basis, we're out on LinkedIn under Acme Paper, and you can find me, Scott Attman, on LinkedIn as well. And we're constantly putting out content to try and educate people on all these areas. And like you said, we work with clients in food service. We work with clients in facilities and operations. So it's everything from contract cleaners that are cleaning office buildings to education, whether it's collegiate to preschools, and then wherever there's food service, caterers to independent operators, full service dining, sports and amusement parks, and so forth. So
got them covered.
We try and get out there and really cover the territory.
Awesome, Scott. Thank you so much. And you guys listening to the show, I've been bringing more of these kinds of folks through because that's just what I'm more interested in. Let me know if you know anybody I should be interviewing. Thank you so much for doing this and for listening. Scott, thanks for swinging by. Hang on. I appreciate you guys. Take care, everybody. See ya.
For more episodes of Through the Noise, go to throughthenoise.us.